All right, Michael Rand here from the Star Tribune with Andrew Krammer and Emily Leiker from the Star Tribune as well. Emily, I'm gonna make sure I'm pronouncing your name right because I know you have a Substack that says you like that, which by the way, okay, I'm already derailing this 20 seconds in, but that that name predated your time coming here, but that's also the Kirk Cousins thing. So how does that all work out?
Yeah, was not thinking of the Kirk Cousins thing when
Okay.
I named it that.
Okay.
But it is a nice coincidence now that I'm
Yes.
in
Yeah.
Minnesota, though obviously
Okay.
that did not happen here either. So
Okay. Okay. Well, good. I'm glad I cleared that all up for everybody. I'm through. That's the sole focus on everyone's mind as we prepare for Vikings versus Rams. As of right now, about 7 hours, many hours away. Still, thought we would kind of catch up to speed on any kind of storylines you might have missed. It might have been impossible along the way to miss them, but some stuff to consider now that Monday is here. Andrew and Emily, how are things on the ground? First off, you guys are obviously both in Arizona, obviously for a Minnesota versus LA playoff game.
Yeah, Emily, we were on the same flight, and the Delta had the whole everything rolled out. They bought out Costco's balloon section, and they had all the Vikings balloons. They had all the decked out. I think every seat had the skull towels. We had a skull chant when we landed. So Emily, I don't know about you, but it seems like there's a lot of Vikings fans who made this trip.
yeah, and just like overhearing people talking both in the gate area and then on the plane, people being like, "Yeah, I have a friend in Arizona," and they were like, "You want to come down and stay with me?" and stuff like that. So definitely seems like there's going to be a lot of purple and gold out here, and people who maybe even weren't going to go to the game when it was in LA, and now that it moved, have decided that they are.
Yeah, the guy sitting next to me told a similar story of he was a Packers fan, but he just decided to hop on the plane and come out. So he's not going to be cheering for the Vikings, but he is going to
Okay.
be attending the game just because it wasn't in LA and he had the opportunity to.
Do they still have a key to the city from 2003, or did that expire?
I'm not sure if they still do.
Not sure.
We'll have to
Okay.
ask. We'll ask Josh McCown where that's at.
Yeah, ask Josh McCown, please do. Ask Josh McCown and Nate Poole if they still have the keys to the city or not. Okay, so I'm going to frame this as kind of like 5 storylines we need to watch going into this game. Obviously, I think the big one, numero uno, is Sam Darnold. It's what we got. We got plenty of questions about Sam Darnold and just how is he gonna shake off not just one of his worst games as a Viking, but honestly one of the worst games of his career, which, there's plenty of competition in that. How do we think that unfolds in this game?
Yeah, that's the primary storyline that Emily and I were following out with Ben as well at TCO this week, and they keep referencing the Jacksonville game, how Sam has bounced back from bad games before. He's done it in his career, certainly had a lot of opportunities to, but now as a Viking, there haven't been that many bad games. And so they kind of have to reference the one time that it was really bad against Jacksonville. And obviously they ripped off a bunch of wins since then. And he has, even in moments, come back from bad moments in the Cardinals game when they were down 13 entering the fourth quarter. There's just been the resiliency that Sam's shown that they're trying to lean on. But this is a moment that Sam's never been in. And we saw on Sunday night in Detroit where that was probably the most playoff type atmosphere he'd ever been in up to that point. So, Emily, I don't expect this to be like Detroit in terms of just how loud it was and all that. But at the same time, we got to see if Sam is ready for this moment.
Yeah, I'm curious how much that game with Detroit kind of acted like a depressurizer for him, and he's maybe able to come into this one a little bit calmer because he does have that experience, which yes, wasn't an actual playoff game, but for all intents and purposes had the similar stakes, had the similar environment, all of that. I think the big thing that we've been talking about with Sam even before this week was like how regimented he is, how consistent he is, and by all accounts, he kind of kept to that this week as well and was able to just kind of go in and really take his performance in that Lions game at face value, which I think is important, obviously, especially for a quarterback and especially coming off a game like that. So I think we'll definitely see him more composed. How much more composed, I guess we leave up for debate. Like, does he look like the Sam he did a couple weeks ago against the Falcons or like the Bears or something like that? Or is it just a little bit of an improvement, and how much is enough for them to get past this Rams team?
I think those are good points. number 2, which kind of goes hand in hand with that, the running game. I think I have a good question here teed up from Perry on Blue Sky. Wants to know who's more important to their team's success, Aaron Jones or Kyron Williams?
That's interesting because I would say, I mean, those two guys have had similar seasons and production, and certainly they're both very important. I would still say it's Kyron Williams more important than Aaron, just because we've seen it. Even though Aaron Jones has gotten a lot of touches this season, and when he's out, you've felt it. This is still a passing offense. Kevin O'Connell wants to run through the quarterback. He wants to run through Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. When they're at their best, it's when Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson are all performing at their peak. And I think Jones is a nice way for them to settle things down, find rhythms, establish longer drives when they want to or when they can. But we see this as an explosive offense. This is one of the most explosive offenses in the league. They belong up there with the likes of Baltimore and Lamar Jackson in terms of how they can throw downfield, and they do it in different ways, obviously, than Baltimore does, but that's how they win. And you see when they get stuck in the red zone, they get stuck in the 10-yard line, how even with Aaron Jones, they cannot often punch it in. It's just not how this offense is built. So I think the Vikings stopping Kyron will go a lot farther than the Rams stopping Aaron Jones tonight.
Right. I was going to bring up the red zone, and all you have to do is look at the touchdown stats for both of them, the rushing touchdowns. Kyron Williams has 14 and Aaron Jones only has 5 this season. They don't turn to that in the red zone a lot, and I think that's where we're going to see a lot of this game come down to, is who can actually punch it in. And obviously that's what lost the Vikings the game last week and made it so lopsided, is that they couldn't get the ball in the end zone when they were there in the red zone. So I definitely agree that it's Kyron Williams.
I tend to agree. I also will bring up this, though. I was spending a little bit too much time kind of looking back at the last Vikings-Rams game, the 30-20 game from early in the season. I mean, it was a weird game. Like, the Vikings only ran like 46 plays. They didn't have the ball all that much, but they scored on their first 2 possessions. They had 2 touchdowns on their first 2 drives. I think Aaron Jones on those 2 drives had 8 carries for 36 yards. So, like, not like, he's not lighting it up, but it's like 4.5 yards per carry. There was a good run pass mix, and I think for the rest of the game he had like 11 carries for 23 yards. So like he can take some pressure off of Sam Darnold in this game if they can get that going. And the Rams are not a particularly good run defense, so I think that was something that kind of hurt them as time went on. If they couldn't run the ball, that's when they started to tee off a little bit more on Darnold. I think they sacked him 3 times in that game. You guys make up a good point about the red zone, though. I think that was a key last week. That was even big against the Rams. They had 1st and goal at the 4. Tried Jones, he got stuffed. I think they had a couple negative plays after that, had to settle for a field goal on one of their kind of second half drives, and that was a big kind of turning point in the game.
Well, and hopefully they don't lose their starting left tackle in the middle of this game.
That's
I mean,
right.
that was a huge element of that game, where I think when he went out, Questenberry, as solid as he can be in a spot start, there's a reason why they went and got Cam Robinson. He's not run blocking the same way Darisaw did. I think that was definitely a factor. But you're right. I mean, when Emily talks about kind of calming Sam's nerves, I do think Aaron can help with that. But the way they're going to win these games, it's going to be by getting the ball to Jefferson and their star players, certainly.
What do you guys think about the mood? Here's takeaway or preview point number 3. We got a lot of stuff from fans kind of pouring in, like taking the temperature. You guys said at the beginning, it seems like there's going to be a lot of Vikings fans at this game, which I think is, will offset some of, what could have been a home field advantage for the Rams. This being a neutral site game adds a weird element to it that I think does help the Vikings. But that said, like, what do you think is the mindset of A, the team, and B, kind of the base going into this game?
Yeah, Emily, what do you think?
I think the team and the base probably feel very different. I think the team feels very confident in its ability to rebound from that Lions game. They were all very composed this week and very consistent in their messaging, which, I mean, it's how they've been every week, but could have changed after a loss, and it didn't. Whereas the base, I was not entirely surprised. I think you guys prepared me well enough to know what their reaction was going to be after that Lions game. They certainly, a large portion of them do not think that this game is going to go well, think that it's over, think that Sam's off his game now and isn't going to be able to get back. So it definitely feels like a little divergent. And I'm curious and maybe you guys can speak to this from prior experiences, like how quickly they'll flip back over if this game goes in the Vikings' favor.
That's a good
Almost
question. Go ahead,
immediately.
Mike.
Almost
Yeah,
almost immediately. Yes. Go on,
you
Andrew.
you think so? Because I was going to counter that. I think there'll be a section of the fan base that still says, well, we've proven we can beat teams even though they lost to the Rams, like the Rams, and we haven't beaten Detroit, haven't beaten a team like Philadelphia, who they haven't even had a chance to play yet, who they would get to. I guess some of the responses, it was funny just asking fans on social media, and like I thought Jared had a great response where he says, I don't know how to feel, to be honest. I want to be optimistic. I don't know. I think that's it. I think it seems like a level of apathy.
And two different people use the word apprehensive. So
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of like the default setting for any Vikings fan, whether things are going well or going poorly. It's apprehensive. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen. Hoping for the best, but bracing myself for heartbreak is kind of the messaging. Although we saw some people that were like, "Hey, this season's already been great. I got confidence in this team. This team is different." So I guess you could feel a different energy. I do think, like I expressed to you guys before we started recording, I don't think that this game being away from Minnesota is necessarily a bad thing. Like, their only playoff win of the Kirk Cousins era came on the road. Like, sometimes when they bring this show on the road, they've been a pretty good road team this season. Sometimes when they get away from that, they can just focus on football and not have kind of that nervous energy of the crowd kind of mingling in with whatever they're doing.
I think it's a legitimate point in terms of it not making it. The NFL is going to try to make it feel like a playoff game, but US Bank would probably do a better job of making it feel like a playoff game. This is a neutral site game. LA is going through a lot. There's a great story in the LA Times about how the NFL and the city and everybody paired together to move them, and the Cardinals had to kind of come together to help move the Rams across state lines just in a matter of days. There's a lot going on behind the scenes for both teams playing, but certainly for the Rams, coming from an organization or a community that's on fire right now. So I think with all that going on, the neutral site aspect of it, wondering how many Rams fans are going to show up. I think the calmness relatively for what it otherwise would have been at US Bank might help a Vikings team that just needs, as you said, Mike, just needs to focus on football and not think about this moment and not think about what this might be if they lose and all the worst fears of Vikings fans come to realization.
Number 4, friend of the podcast, especially Access Vikings, Danny Carlson wrote in, said, I believe the Vikings-Rams game in October is the only game this year when the Vikings defense didn't record a sack. How do you think Brian Flores will be prepared for the quick game? Having Blake Cashman will certainly help, he said. And I had dug into this a little bit. Yeah, Stafford threw the ball 34 times, no sacks, just 2 quarterback hits, at least according to Pro Football Reference. He was very comfortable, entirely too comfortable in that game. Vikings were playing on a short week. I don't know how to exactly reconcile that, but that was not a good pass rush that game.
Well, and I think of the one Stafford threw a touchdown, one of his 4 in that game. It was where spun around from Grenard. Grenard just had him in his hands and he spins away. And Stafford's 36, and that looked like something we'd seen from him in Detroit, years before. I need to see more of that from him to think that that's going to be sustainable. Now, this whole Rams offense is built on not taking sacks. That's just how they operate. I think lately they've taken some. I think he took 5 against the Cardinals. Oh no, that was at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, he's gone 4 straight games without taking a sack. Stafford has. Wow. So they've kind of that's been their whole thing. And so talking about prepared for the quick game, Emily, you asked Brian Flores about that and Puka Nacua this week. It seems like they're going to be better prepared for than they were last time.
Right. Well, they had seemingly no idea that Puka was going to play. And I know there's been discussion among us this week of were they maybe tipped off that Puka wasn't going to play, and then that ended up being incorrect or was trying to distract them, whatever. So it will be interesting to see how well they can contain them and how that affects the other parts of the game plan. Because you can certainly see a situation where 4 hours before that game, they find out Puka's playing. Okay, we're going to scramble some things, and that affects what they're doing with the pass rush because they're trying to contain more over the top, whatever it may be. So Puka being back and them knowing that, I think will have a lot more defensive ramifications on this game than we maybe thought it would. Now that we know that was a surprise the first time around.
Yeah, he had just practiced once. Puka did before coming back and had that massive game, and they're going to need better from Gilmore and from their corners, Bynum, who didn't tackle well in Detroit. So those guys are going to have to rally and tackle well because the ball's going to come out, and when they do want to throw downfield, it'll be kind of max protect to set up to throw, and at that point, yeah, they'll have to try to break through. But I don't expect them to do that very often. I think they'll be trying to get the ball out quite a bit.
Final thing, Andrew, you alluded to this earlier. They have business to take care of tonight, work to attend to, but unlike what Dan Campbell said at the end of the Detroit game, they would not be back in Detroit. They would be in Philadelphia if they win this game by virtue of Washington outlasting Tampa Bay on Sunday night. So now Washington will go to Detroit. Winner of this game plays Philadelphia. It has, obviously, your upcoming opponent has no bearing on how you're going to play this game, but like, how do you feel like their path sets up now, knowing that it's Philadelphia and not Detroit?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because they have not faced Philadelphia since the week 2 loss and really just the second game of the Brian Flores tenure in 2023. They got the doors blown off of them in that game. So it'll be interesting because I think Philadelphia is not easier than Detroit, even though it might seem that way to some Vikings fans. I think Saquon Barkley, the way he's running, I know they just lost Nakobe Dean on defense, which is a pretty big injury for them, but they've got so much talent in their front. And I've heard from Vikings fans that they're afraid of the Rams' talent in their front seven. The Eagles have way more. And I think in terms of bad matchups for the interior offensive line, for Sam Darnold versus pressure, it could be pretty tough. So, Emily, what do you think about just how this shook out in terms of if they want to go to the Super Bowl, like we had kind of been talking about all December, it'd be through Philadelphia and then Detroit.
Possibly.
Yeah, I've been like waffling on the mental side of it, and would it have been better for them to see the Lions sooner and see them like this upcoming weekend if they were to win, or does pushing it back another week give them a little more peace of mind? Maybe they're calmer. They've learned more in their 2 other playoff games, and I don't know. I haven't made up my mind on that yet. I think certainly Philadelphia is going to pose a challenge, and that will be an interesting game to watch with Saquon and with the fact that, like you said, they haven't seen this team in a while. I think ultimately I would lean towards them going to Philly probably being slightly more favorable for the Vikings, but then again, that sets up like a huge NFC title game and all of that Lions-Vikings rematch tension. So I don't know.
Final thing, guys. Who are we predicting? We had to make predictions a few days ago, but who are we predicting in this game?
I know it's not the case for all of us at the Strip, but I'm picking a Vikings win. I think they're going to make Matthew Stafford look his age. I think it's a bad sign, actually, that the Rams rested everybody in Week 18 after wheezing through some wins against some bad teams at the end of the season. With really still something to play for in terms of the 3 or 4 seed, and they gave that up to get the rest. I think it's because those guys need it. I think Flores is going to be better prepared. And I think that's going to be a difference. The question is, though, it's Sam Darnold. Does he give them enough? Because if he has anywhere close to the performance he had on Sunday night in Detroit, it just doesn't give them much of a chance. He needs to be so much better. You need more than 18 of 41, even if you're keeping Matthew Stafford in that offense down. But I think he does play better. I think he plays at least back toward his average. You see a little bit of a bounce back from him. And I think they win. And of course, though, I think it's going to be close. What do you think, Emily?
Yeah, I also picked the Vikings in a close game for many of the reasons you just went through. I'll throw in, because we haven't mentioned him at all, Justin Jefferson, I think, will be sharper this game. He is looking for a playoff win on his resume. He doesn't have one. He has many of the other accolades that you would want to see for a wide receiver of his caliber, but that's one that's missing. And he doesn't even honestly have like some huge play that makes a playoff game interesting, exciting, all of those things. So I think I'll certainly be looking for one of those from him tonight. And I think if he can get that, then this goes in the Vikings' favor.
I picked the Vikings too, 30-27, a familiar score to Vikings fans from NFC title game infamy in 1998. But we'll see. I'm just ready for this game to be played. I had to sit through the whole weekend, all of Monday. So we'll get this game played Monday night. Appreciate it to both of you guys for jumping on. Thanks everybody for the great questions, and look for some post-game stuff from myself, from the Access Vikings folks, from Emily, everybody out in Arizona. Until then, try to make it through. We'll be there soon.